Today I'm here to introduce you to Lauren Bridges' talk. So welcome to the second series about data and the everyday. My name is Sofia Ponte. I'm teaching at the School of Design, Technology and Communication of the Universidade Europeia in Lisbon. My colleagues Ana, Cristina Ponte, Ana Viseu, and Paulo Nuno Vicente and I are coordinating this series of talks organized by Nova Institute of Communication in Lisbon and YAD. On the backstage is Patricia Caneira, who assures that everything runs well from the registration to this precise moment. Thank you, Patricia. So as you know, this series of talks aims to make visible our engagements and interactions with data and to explore the implications and challenges of living in a dated world. The talks explore a variety of themes and follow an informal and interactive format. Each lecture is followed by a Q&A from the audience, so please share your thoughts and ideas after hearing Lauren insight on this aspect of smart home security. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to a great expert and her topic. Lauren Bridges is a critical data studies researcher investigating the social and environmental implications of the cloud. Lauren is developing her PhD research at the Annenberg School for Communication at the University of Pennsylvania in the US. She's using ethnographic and interpretive methods. Lauren's dissertation investigates the local impacts of data centers and warehouses in rural Virginia and Southern California in the US. Lauren has published in New Media and Society, Big Data in Society, Information Communication in Society, and has received several awards and honorary mentions by various organizations in the fields of communication in the US. So Lauren Bridges' title of her talk is The Carceral Effect of Smart Home Security. And Laura, thank you for coming and joining us in this reflection.
You're mute, Lauren.
Can you see my screen? Yes, you can see my slides. Perfect. Thank you for such a warm welcome, Professor Ponte. It is my honor to be here and to participate in this important series of conversations on the social and political implications of our increasingly datafied society. I also want to thank Dr. Ana Viseu for your invitation to give this talk, and Patricia Caneira for coordinating much of the logistics behind the scenes, and to the hosts of the series as well. I'm grateful to have the space and time to address you today, and also to talk about this topic, which I see as a really important issue. And for everyone that's tuned in, and to those that will review the recording after the fact, I welcome your questions and the discussion that will follow. So the title of my talk today is The Carceral Effect of Smart Home Security, where I'll be using Amazon Ring to explore some of the implications of the internet-connected home security cameras. But first, just a little about me and the kinds of questions that animate my work. As Dr. Ponte noted already, my research focuses on the impacts of digital infrastructure, in particular the cloud, which I've been interested in now for about 6 years, ever since I worked as a grant writer in Australian manufacturing in my home country, and that was prior to starting the PhD. During that time, I became exposed to the mass scale consolidation that was going on in commercial computing. Software programs were being transitioned out of single purchase license models in favor of a subscription model accessed through the internet, and on-premise computing hardware was being decommissioned in favor of off-site commercial computing in a pay-as-you-go model. It seemed that every company, every government entity, every software program and computing process was being moved to the cloud. And I wondered, what does this all mean? What and where is the cloud? Who owns the cloud? And who's protecting our data? Over the years, my questions have broadened to include the social and cultural and political implications of the cloud and big data infrastructures more generally. My dissertation is based on a multi-sided ethnographic study of the situated local impacts of data centers in Northern Virginia and the datafied labor practices that the cloud makes possible in warehouses in Southern California, using Amazon as my case study. And I'd be happy to talk more about this later. But today I'm going to speak about what I see as a crucial building block of Amazon's surveillance infrastructures, or what I call the largest civilian surveillance network in the United States and quickly growing around the globe. But commercially available video home security systems have been around since the late 1970s. So what's novel about the recent rise of smart home security systems? I argue that it is precisely the networked effect of Amazon Ring's home video surveillance cameras that are connected through the internet and stored and processed in the cloud that make it a turning point in the history of surveillance. This cloud-connected nature of Ring's cameras allows them to be centrally queried and monitored with the assistance of machine learning and artificial intelligence. This also makes them an attractive asset for law enforcement, who, as we will see, use Ring to sidestep legal protections to surveil neighborhoods in the United States. My talk is based on an academic article that I published last year and a subsequent op-ed in The Guardian, where I first explore some of the implications of Ring. And I will provide some important updates that have happened since the publication of these articles. While my talk is primarily focused on the United States context, Amazon Ring is a global program and it has global implications. And I'll explore some of these, especially around the GDPR. And I would love to talk with any privacy expert in the crowd about the recently passed law on video surveillance in Portugal to think through some of the implications in your context. Though I am not an expert in these areas, so perhaps we can think through some of these implications together. In terms of a roadmap, this talk addresses three central questions in order. First, what is and how do we study a thing like Ring? Here I'll present my theoretical and methodological approach and different ways that we can think about and study a technology like Ring. Second, why does it matter and what's at stake? And here I'll think through some of the social, political, and legal implications of Ring. Finally, what is to be done? And I'm not sure I have all the answers here, so I'll just think through some of the policy implications and possible courses of action. Throughout the talk, I will make the case that Ring is much more than a single technology, but it is actually a part of a vast assemblage of digital surveillance tools and digital infrastructure owned by Amazon. And I will make the case that we need to pay attention to these infrastructures to start to demand oversight and accountability, especially for the technologies that are used to surveil our communities. So first, what is Ring? Institutionally, Ring could be thought of as a wholly owned subsidiary of Amazon that sells home security devices, such as the signature product, their Ring video doorbell camera. Ring currently sells to a number of countries across Europe and the Americas, Oceania, and Africa. But the Ring program, as I mentioned, is much more than video cameras themselves. I call it a surveillance assemblage to denote the multiple different entities that comprise the Ring sphere of surveillance. Here I draw from sociologists Kevin Haggerty and Richard Erickson, who define a surveillance assemblage as, quote, the convergence of once discrete surveillance systems, end quote, in ways that increase the degree of surveillance capacity. Haggerty and Erickson, of course, are drawing from Deleuze and Guattari's theorization of the assemblage, which comprises of individual entities that enter into relation with one another. These entities or things, they can be physical objects, happenings, events, as well as signs and utterances. Assemblages then they're considered socio-technical systems defined by relations of exteriority that respect the relative autonomy of the parts. An assemblage, though, is not a single technical object, but it is a set of relations between physical objects, discourses, infrastructures, environments, and people. The ring surveillance assemblage is comprised of physical surveillance products, doorbells, alarms, sensors, speakers, floodlights, signs, a social media crime reporting platform called Neighbors, partnerships with law enforcement who can access recordings, marketing discourses of fear and security, and internet-connected cloud servers. It also includes convergence and compatibility with other Amazon technologies, in particular, Amazon's personal artificial intelligence assistant, Alexa. All of these things together make up the ring surveillance assemblage, which is not a static entity, but it's an evolving set of relations. I argue that the ring surveillance assemblage obfuscates its infrastructures through practices of what is called urban camouflage, that is posing as doorbells or lights or sensors, hiding in plain sight. And they also hide the size of the network by obscuring its relationship to Amazon cloud computing operations. And here you see my interest in the cloud coming to the foreground. Thinking about ring as an assemblage, though, poses a number of methodological problems. How do you study a thing that is a moving target, operating at multiple scales and through emergent relations? But rather than try to capture its totality, I turn to the theory and methodology of affordances to understand ring in terms of its design, how it functions socially, and how users navigate their position and power. The concept of affordances was first introduced by Gibson to describe the way an environment provides or furnishes or affords certain perceptions and actions to people. More recently, the theory of affordances has been taken up by communication and media scholars to discuss the technical agency of technologies and how they produce limited fields of action without reverting to technological determinism that treats technology as autonomous or as self-directed. This seemingly benign technology entails a new set of affordances once it is connected to the internet, collated in the cloud, shared through social media, and also made accessible to law enforcement. To track the path of the ring surveillance assemblage, I propose an extended version of the walkthrough method developed by Light et al. In 2018. They analyze an app's affordances by paying attention to its architectures, infrastructures, and cultural representations. Whereas I conduct a walkthrough of the ring surveillance assemblage by following the path of the customer, starting with company marketing materials at the site of purchase. I then analyze the technological affordances of Ring's products and the Neighbors app, paired with a qualitative content analysis of customer reviews, posts on the Neighbors app, reports of the partnership with law enforcement, all to understand what happens after the data leaves a customer's control. So to give you an idea of some of the data or text that I'm working with, I reviewed marketing materials from Ring, including TV ads pre and post Amazon's purchase in 2018, online videos purchased on the Ring, posted on the Ring website, and instructional videos. I reviewed hundreds of user posts on the Neighbors app, paying attention to particular moments when community tensions were high. I also conducted a qualitative content analysis of 150 customer testimonies and reviews from 3 different review sites, not on Amazon. And to understand the implications of Ring's partnerships with law enforcement, over the course of 18 months, I collated self-reported data from Ring, disclosing the number of active partnerships that they have with law enforcement and how many requests they were making to users. I then compared this to maps of police violence in the United States. Since last year, I have been also submitting freedom of information requests to police departments to understand what they do with the data and how it is used to influence decisions. But so far, I haven't received much insight from these requests. So what did I find? I actually have to reshare my screen because I think I didn't share it with sound, but I'd like to walk through a couple of marketing videos that Ring posted both before Amazon's purchase and then after Amazon's purchase. Just excuse me while I reshare my screen. Okay.
Crime likes a neighborhood where no one's watching. That's why at Ring we created the Ring Neighbors app. It's like a neighborhood watch, but on your phone. So when someone's casing one home, everyone knows. Because this home is now connected to that home, and that home is connected to this home, keeping everyone in the community safe and in the know. Join the new Neighborhood Watch. Download the Neighbors app today and make your neighborhood a Ring neighborhood.
Okay. Now I'm going to go back to the slides and to the second video. So this one was created by Amazon after their purchase.
Look, now you can so pro about the Ring Video Doorbell Pro 2. Let's take a look. Now you can see more with our new head-to-toe video, so you'll never miss what's on your porch. Hear more with HD audio that delivers our cleanest sound yet.
Come on, Callie, we're going now. Hey, girl.
Hi, I'll be right down.
Can't make it to your phone? Let Alexa do the talking.
Delivered for John.
Please leave the package behind the railing.
And no more with Bird's Eye View, so you're aware if someone's there and where they've been.
Hello? Hi, cable guy. Nah. You're right. I'm not.
The Ring Video Doorbell Pro 2 works with your other Ring devices and beyond for the most seamless experience out there. If someone's at the door,
Hi, can you let us in?
you can let them in.
Nope, I'm out.
If your lights sense motion, you'll know who's there. If your alarm is triggered, your doorbell starts recording automatically. And you can control it all from one convenient place, the Ring app. Ring Video Doorbell Pro 2. It's smart security made simple.
Okay, can you hear me again? Yes, great. So there's a notable shift from the earlier to later marketing messages. In the ad that aired before Amazon's purchase, the tone was a lot more somber. There was no music, the content was focused on crime and the ability to create a new neighborhood watch, which is connected to one another through the Neighbors app. Later ads, though, de-emphasized the surveillance nature of Ring's products and instead focus on the technical aspects of Ring devices, the head-to-toe video, HD audio, integration with Alexa. And this is all set to lighthearted music and ending on a Girl Scout selling cookies. See, Amazon know the, apologies.
What's so pro about the Ring Video Doorbell?
See, my apologies. Let me just refine my place. Amazon know the importance of framing Ring as an innovative smart home security device and not as a tool of surveillance. For example, they prefer the term public safety agency to refer to their partnerships with law enforcement rather than police or firefighters. This affectively primes Ring and its affiliated Neighbors app through a positive frame of safety rather than a negative valence of surveillance. In fact, when they began their partnerships with law enforcement, they counseled the police on how to explain the Ring program to community members, and they forbade police from using terms such as surveillance or home security cameras in their materials. Here we see an internal document from a police department that was acquired through Freedom of Information requests by a journalist. This shows Ring's line edits to police departments, to a police department press release. Ring basically keep a very tight control on the messaging and the narrative about their products. Notably, in the review websites, all of the review websites that I reviewed showed a negative disposition towards Ring, which drastically departed from the reviews that Ring products have on Amazon's website, Both SiteJaber and Trustpilot rated Ring 1.4 and 1.5 out of 5 stars respectively, while Amazon's review ranged from 4.2 to 4.6 out of 5 for Ring products. Customer reviews revealed systemic concerns around internet and power connectivity, instances of hacking, issues with customer service, subscription pricing complaints, battery and solar charge issues, recording problems, sensor problems, poor product quality, hardware defects, lost deliveries, refund problems, application issues, and concerns over the partnerships with police. So why does this all matter? Counter to the corporate rhetoric, I argue that the Ring surveillance assemblage is actually expanding the carceral state through its social media application neighbors, and it is extending the industrial police surveillance state through its partnerships with law enforcement. But let me break those down a little more. I use expansion purposely here to denote a kind of act of lateral saturation. This lateral saturation is achieved through what Mark Andreevich and Mark Burden call the sensor society, which marks a shift from discrete targeted forms of information collection to ever expanding forms of data capture through sensors that are always on and always connected. Expansion as an act of the carceral state is predicated on social relations where neighbors negotiate physical and digital boundaries through the neighbor's app. I refer here to Weaver et al.'s definition of the carceral state as a spatially concentrated, more punitive, surveillance and punishment-oriented system of governance. Like prisons themselves, the carceral effect of this system is created through architectures and infrastructures of incarceration, which in this case are digital technologies. The Carceral Tech Resistance Network defined carceral technologies as tech that are bound up in control, coercion, capture, and exile of entire categories of people. Carceral technologies then are both tools of minority exclusion and policing the boundary of who can be in what space, and they are tools of what Kayenga Yamada Taylor calls predatory inclusion for the way that they disproportionately harm communities of color. The technologies, I argue, along with many others, sustain a long history of racialized and class-based surveillance that disproportionately targets Black, Indigenous, immigrant, and poor communities. This is something that sociologist and criminologist Rahim Kurwa calls the building of, a quote, digital gated communities to denote the digitized policing of race in residential space. Kurwa analyzed posts from a community social networking platform Nextdoor, and I witnessed very similar patterns on Neighbors, which is Ring's very own social media crime reporting app. So Neighbors is a social media platform and application which encourages users to post video and content about suspected crimes and community concerns as they happen. For example, fires, gunshots, and more recently, missing pets. Anyone can post to the Neighbors app, even if you do not own a Ring product, though they make it very easy for users to share their Ring video content. Every post is anonymized, and people can only post within a 5-mile radius of their location. This is currently only available within the United States, but I believe they have plans to expand it globally. Neighbors was acquired as a part of Amazon's purchase of Ring, and soon after the acquisition, Amazon announced its partnerships with local law enforcement. So it's through the Neighbors app where law enforcement can place requests to access user content captured on their Ring devices. Neighbors, like any other social media platform, has a hidden network of content moderators who check content for appropriateness before it is posted. Despite Neighbors' content moderation guidelines, which explicitly condemns hate speech, racial profiling, and other forms of prejudice, this has not prevented racialized attacks on people captured in videos. In 2020, they had to remove the category suspicious because they were finding that this tag was most commonly attributed to people of color going about their daily lives. One moment. Just going to turn off the sound for this one. So here we see an example of a young Black man approaching a front door with a clipboard. Eventually, a man's voice asks him, "What's up?" The young man asks to speak with the voice, and he replies, "No." And then you see the young man leaving. The user posts this video to the neighbor's app, which then sparks outrage as to why this young man has approached the door. But he's seemingly just going about his life. I also witnessed multiple moments when users posted comments that condemned people using coded, racialized, and class-based language. For example, during the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020 in Philadelphia, one person commented after hearing a loud bang, "Probably just some locals getting new shoes," to which another user replied, "And yet they still look like crap," using racially coded collective pronoun they to refer to residents of the historically Black neighborhood of West Philadelphia. Many of the posts had users recanting Trumpian rhetoric of law and order and calls to call in the National Guard to be deployed against protesters. But these tensions are not new. Instead, these kinds of community surveillance networks look and feel very similar to the white citizen policing councils of the South during the 1950s and the 1960s. However, there is a crucial difference between earlier distributed forms of community organized policing and the centralized mass scale community surveillance networks like Ring. Here, it is important to draw a distinction between the two different types of security cameras. So first of all, there are closed circuit devices that record and store video locally, like on a hard drive. These have been commercially available since the late 1970s, and they were popularized in the 1980s. And now there are internet connected cameras, or IP cameras, that when they detect motion, they record and store in the cloud, or they can also store locally, but they are duplicated in the cloud. This is an issue not so much about the technology then, about the surveillance cameras themselves, because they have been around for decades, but it's about who is getting access to the recorded content and how it is being used. IP cameras connected to the internet allow users to monitor video feeds from anywhere. And in the case of Ring, all that video content is stored in the cloud on Amazon Web Servers. The network connected nature of the Ring camera allows them to be centrally queried and searched very easily, and provides a huge amount of data for machine learning purposes. And I argue that law enforcement used these commercially available surveillance cameras installed in residential spaces to enlist community members in surveillance practices that would otherwise be illegal for law enforcement to do themselves. So how do they do this? Since Amazon acquired Ring in 2018, they have secured over 2,000 partnerships with law enforcement and fire agencies. And that amounts to approximately 1 in 10 police departments across the United States. This means that law enforcement can place requests to access user content captured on Ring cameras without the need for a warrant. In order for law enforcement to get a warrant, there must be probable cause, and warrants are limited in scope. Whereas for law enforcement to place requests to Ring users, they only have to meet Amazon Ring's internal company guidelines for video requests. Law enforcement can also request content directly from Ring with a warrant, sidestepping the need to attain user consent to release the content. In effect, this turns your neighbor's doorbell camera into a kind of always-on police informant. I see this as an extension of law enforcement surveillance into residential space that would otherwise be limited by privacy protections in the United States context. So in the US, the Fourth Amendment prevents police from placing cameras in residential areas that might record people in their private residence. However, because Ring cameras are owned and installed by civilians, not by law enforcement are given a backdoor entry into private recordings of people in residential and public space. This is why I argue that Ring blurs the line between police work and civilian surveillance, and they turn your neighbor's home security surveillance system into an informant. Except unlike a human informant, it's always watching and always ready to record. The partnerships with law enforcement have also led to legal scholar Yusina Flores to question if Amazon has become an agent acting on behalf of law enforcement. Flores points to the way that Ring trains police in how to use their products and how to place requests to users to gain access to content. If Amazon were seen to be an agent acting on behalf of law enforcement, then their cameras might be considered an extension of the state, which would also be prohibited under the Fourth Amendment. As it stands though, Ring claimed that users ultimately have the power of consent, and that only content that a neighbor chooses to share on the neighbor's app will be publicly accessible to law enforcement. But this raises two major concerns around consent. The first one is that consent only lies in the hand of the Ring camera owner. So consider your neighbor gets a doorbell camera that faces your property or the footpath and all the public space between your properties. When your neighbor consents to releasing their video content to law enforcement, they might be releasing recorded content that captures you, your family, your mailman, and anyone going about their everyday lives. And this is all without the need for a warrant. The second issue around consent is that it's unlimited and irreversible. Once consent is granted, there is no limitation on how that content will be used, who it will be shared with, or how it could be used in the future, and there's no way to revoke the consent once it's granted. It's unclear what is being done with the recordings once they are released. And this is not only a concern for local law enforcement, but once they have gained access to the content, they could share it with other law enforcement agencies like immigration control. It's also a concern, my apologies. Just lost my spot, I'm sorry.
No worries, we'll wait.
Okay, consent, here we go. It is also a concern for how your content could be used by the company. So Ring's terms of service state that once you post content from neighbors, you grant Ring unlimited, irrevocable, fee-free, royalty-free, perpetual, worldwide right to use, distribute, store, delete, translate, copy, modify, display, and create derivatives of the works. So consent is first determined by Ring, and then it's provided to the person who owns the Ring camera. In a European context, under GDPR, this has already created issues where Ring owners are being fined for not attaining meaningful consent for the recordings of their neighbors. Ring's response to this has been to, quote, respect the privacy of your neighbors and to comply with any applicable law, which in effect washes their hands of any responsibility. Another major concern around the partnerships with law enforcement is just how extensive the network is. We currently have no way of knowing how big the Ring network is in the United States. And I know because I've asked Ring on a number of occasions through various different methods, and they've told me on background that they do not disclose these figures. Though they also told me that I can't attribute that to a Ring spokesperson. According to a report by the business intelligence company Strategy Analytics, they estimate that in 2020, Ring sold around 1.4 million devices globally. One senior analyst called Ring the Apple of the video doorbell market. And demand has spiked during the pandemic as people are spending more time at home, and there is a growing uptake of smart home security devices. And Ring just generally make these figures very difficult to discern as all of their sales figures are folded into Amazon's financial statements and they do not separate them out. So the size of the network will also affect how many cameras law enforcement can access. According to the self-reported data that Ring used to report on a quarterly basis, in the year to the end of April 2021, law enforcement placed more than 22,000 individual requests to access content captured on recorded Ring cameras. That is 22,000 requests that did not require a warrant. And I was collating this data over the course of 18 months. But here is an important update that's happened since the publication of my work. So since I published my article, Ring have changed the way law enforcement place requests. Until June 2021, the company provided a special neighbors portal that let law enforcement request access to footage from Ring owners, even if they had not posted it publicly. They then reported those numbers and reported them in the active agency map on a quarterly basis, which I was exporting also on a quarterly basis. And I'd be happy to show you some of the data. However, in a recent report by the policing project at NYU, they highlight how Ring have increased transparency because now they display all of the requests publicly in the Neighbors app. So my issue here is that they failed to address what has been lost. And I'll try to explain this in a little more detail. So here you see two different screenshots. Now the active agency map only shows the name of the agency and the date of their partnership with Ring, the date that their partnership with Ring became active. On the left, you see a picture of a screenshot that is taken from a presentation that I gave in May of 2021. It's a bit blurry, but you can see Tampa, Florida, and the date that the partnership became active. And for that quarter, 190 individual requests were placed to users. Then on the right, this picture was taken about a week ago. So basically now we don't have any idea on how many requests are being placed on a quarterly basis because they say that they've increased transparency by putting them all in the Neighbors platform. So the way that Ring have made the change basically takes away the aggregate number of requests. So they're no longer being reported. Instead, they claim to have increased transparency. And yes, on the one hand, it's good that now all of the requests are displayed for everyone to see inside the Neighbors app. But on the other hand, we now have less information about the total number of requests being made by law enforcement. And this becomes more difficult to identify possible abuse by law enforcement and compare these figures to compare these figures of requests to reports of police violence, for example. The second update that occurred after I published my article is that Ring have extended their moratorium on selling facial recognition technology to law enforcement. Actually, this happened the day after I published the op-ed in The Guardian. However, this is somewhat misleading as it does not prevent law enforcement from buying these tools from other companies and applying it to Ring content. Facial recognition technology can obviously be sold and applied to recorded video content and live feeds. And controversial companies like Clearview AI frames itself as a tool for law enforcement and are known to sell facial recognition technology to law enforcement. The ACLU also recently reported on a video analytics company, Vintra, that has created a video face search tool. In a recent marketing video, the company executive searches through a month's worth of video footage captured on around 10 fixed cameras, plus body cameras in a transit center in San Jose, California. He feeds the system with the photograph of the male subject, and then the system does a facial recognition search through all of the stored video from that month and produces 23 snapshots of the man from the cameras, the center's cameras. The ACLU said it is a stark reminder of the power of these technologies and how they are likely to be used by law enforcement, powerful corporations, and others if we allow society, if we as a society allow it. So other major issues are the potential for abuse, which I referenced, And for example, the Electronic Frontier Foundation reported in the summer of 2020 that the LAPD were using the Neighbors app to place requests to users for content from their cameras to surveil protesters. So this is not only a violation of the right to assemble, but it could have a really serious chilling effect on social justice movements and holding police to account. Also, hacking is an underreported issue, which I noticed in the review content from users, and IP cameras themselves are more prone to hacking. There have been a number of high-profile cases of hacking, including a class action lawsuit against Ring for their lax security measures. In one particularly chilling incident, an 8-year-old girl was harassed in her bedroom by a stranger who called himself Santa Claus and told her that she could do anything she liked. Another issue arises around machine learning and how the data may be used for other purposes. In 2019, The Intercept reported that Ring Labs, based in the Ukraine, was using footage captured from Ring cameras in the United States to tag and train machine learning, all without users' consent. It's been since been reported that this program has been discontinued, but it does not rule out other similar projects from being developed. And also advocates against domestic violence have raised a number of concerns about how these technologies might be misused by abusers. Finally, there is a concern around how law enforcement might gain access to live feeds of video cameras, which could be collated in fusion centers and real-time crime centers, where machine learning, artificial intelligence, and predictive analytics could be applied as events are unfolding. This is not just a conspiracy, but there is already a program in Jackson, Mississippi that connects Ring cameras to a real-time crime center, all connecting live feeds to the real-time crime center. All a user needs to do is provide a one-time consent. When Amazon were questioned about the program, a spokesperson denied any connection with it, saying, quote, "Ring is not working with any of the companies or the city in connection with this program," end quote. But Amazon hides behind obfuscatory corporate rhetoric, which distances the company from their infrastructural holdings. Instead of working directly with Ring, the Mississippi Police Department partnered with 2 local tech firms, and they created a backdoor entry into consenting Ring users' feeds. And a quick glance at one of the partnered websites also reveals that their cloud services are hosted by none other than Amazon Web Services. So when Amazon and Ring say that they are not working with the companies involved, this is only a partial truth, as Amazon Web Services is quite literally powering this project through the AWS cloud. All of this raises a number of questions about what is to be done. And quite frankly, I do not have all of the answers, but I do see the need for increased oversight, accountability, and transparency, especially around the police partnerships. We also need to address issues of consent, to strengthen privacy law in the United States, especially to ban facial recognition technology, to audit police use of data, and to demand reporting of the data use. One possible avenue for increased oversight are the new police oversight committees that are being formed in the United States that review new policing technologies before they're deployed in the field. As a society and users, we have to decide what level of surveillance we will allow into our homes and into our neighborhoods, because as I've outlined here, withdrawal of consent after the fact is not guaranteed. On a domestic level, Amazon's surveillance assemblage challenges civil rights and privacy laws that are designed to protect citizens from undue surveillance, both from corporate actors and from their governments. On a global scale, Amazon's surveillance assemblage raises a number of concerns about national sovereignty and the convergence of geopolitical and technological power. Due to the globally connected nature of Amazon's surveillance products, these concerns reach well beyond the United States nation state. Ring is more than individual community members installing doorbells with cameras that extend beyond their property into public space. It is the blurring of boundaries between police work and civilian surveillance the reliance on obscure digital infrastructures that hide to whom and to what users are connecting when they install a Ring device, and the expansion of Amazon's vast infrastructural power. Thank you very much.
Wow, Lauren, thank you so much. This was really nice. A bit scary. We have a few questions already in the chat. I think it's also interesting to remind, especially for the Europeans that are here at this talk, that although there's a different panorama between like the security issues and the representation of fear in Europe than in the US, some of Amazon's companies that are dealing with this data are based in Europe. So there are European employees that are actually dealing with some of these data that is being gathering in the US, right? Maybe you would like to go into that as well a little bit, but maybe we could start with Anna's question about, have been there any legal challenges to Amazon's terms of service, and is its status a potential agent for law enforcement?
That's a great question. And so far, I don't know of any legal challenges to that. That argument came from a legal scholar, Yacina Flores, but I haven't seen it taken up in any lawsuit, either in America or elsewhere. But I do think it's a really sound argument that Amazon are becoming an agent of law enforcement. And if they are seen to be an agent of law enforcement, then these cameras might be considered an extension of the government. So then they would be outlawed by the Fourth Amendment, or be in violation of the Fourth Amendment. But I haven't seen that argument taken up.
Okay, we have another question by Paulo Nuno Vicente, who asks, in the US, is there any legal framework in place to regulate the use of these videos in the context of deep learning artificial neural networks? By law, how are these videos categorized? Private, semi-private, public?
I think that this is a crucial question, Paulo. There are no laws. Like in short, the answer is no. There are no laws restricting the use of this data for other purposes, which is why we've seen it being used in machine learning. And I highly suspect that it's being used for other purposes to train machine learning. How is the video categorized? Apparently, according to the terms of service, the user owns the rights to the video, so it's considered private content. And that user then provides, they provide consent to release the content to law enforcement. But that's not quite true, because all of the content is backed up and stored on the Amazon cloud. And police or law enforcement can easily get a warrant and request the content directly from Amazon, which is also what they do. So yeah, there is no legal framework at the moment in the United States to regulate the use of this content for other purposes like deep learning or artificial intelligence.
Okay, Teresa also left a reminder that there's a call on transparency articles and regimes. She left a link here if anyone is interested in contributing to the discussion. The journal is published by IC Nova. And Jair also places a very interesting question about if you believe that is purely political move towards a police state, or if that has a commercial side to it. How do you see Amazon monetizing the recordings?
Thank you for your question, Jaya. I definitely see this as a dual and mutually beneficial relationship. So on the one hand, it extends the police state. So it is a beneficial political move to increase the surveillance capacity of the police state. But it is absolutely, and I would say almost primarily, a commercial move. Amazon are deeply concerned about what we call porch pirates here, which are people that come and steal packages from people's front doors. And this surveillance network is a counter to the kinds of, just local thievery that's happening. It's a way for Amazon customers to buy more Amazon products. And the integration with Alexa is really where I see the monetization happening. So initially there was integration with Alexa early on, but there wasn't a large focus on that. But now you start to see the marketing messages shift where Alexa will blend into the Ring products. So it's not just Alexa, your home assistant, it's your whole home security system. It's your being able to turn on and off the lights, being able to lock the door, being able to know who's at your front door. So the real monetization of this product, I really see in the integration with their artificial intelligence, Alexa. Yeah.
Can I just add something as well? Because maybe you could also talk about this, because I went to check how much is one of these devices, and how much do you pay monthly to have access to the cloud and so on. It's not that expensive, right?
No, they purposely price them at very accessible, levels to get into the product, I guess. Initially here in the United States, police were giving them away to community members for free. They've had a number of promotions where they give out the cameras because they want to encourage uptake. But as you just noted, there is a caveat to that, which is that to access the recordings from your device, you have to pay for an ongoing subscription to the cloud services. So essentially your device is somewhat useless if you don't pay for the subscription. You can access the live feed at any point from your phone or a device, but it won't record and store that to the cloud unless you're paying for a subscription. For the subscription purpose. Yeah.
Okay, let's continue. You have a really nice message here from Madison, thanking you for a great talk. We'll share it with you. Madison also asks, how do you see this normalization of self-surveillance and social media sharing as information or accepting of the surveillance assemblage?
Yeah, thank you, Madison, for this question. And also you've picked up one of my, I guess, one of the most interesting cultural products, which is starting to proliferate, is these neighbors video or neighborly moments videos, where there's a whole, new movement around sharing video content of like animals in your backyard, or like people proposing to others, or these very heartfelt, very nice moments that are captured on these surveillance devices. And obviously I think this is a counter message to the darker issues of surveillance, but I do also see it as a really interesting phenomenon in the normalization of surveilling our residential space. So actually before this talk, we were just briefly discussing what I see as one of the crucial differences with these kinds of surveillance technologies. We might all say that we've long given up our privacy because we have devices on us that are like, mini surveillance devices that we take with us, and they track us in our every movements, and every time we go online, we're being tracked. But I want to resist this and say that we haven't yet taken video camera surveillance into our homes. One of the products that I didn't focus on today that Ring are developing is also a home video drone that flies around your apartment when you're not there. But it's not just inside the home, obviously, it's also outside the home and your neighbors and your neighborhood. And I do see it as a normalizing of what I see as one of the last frontiers of our private space. And it is deeply, deeply concerning.
Sorry, just had muted. Thank you. So João Machado also has something to question. João says, lovely talk, thank you. My question, when comparing the Ring system with other non-surveillance video upload platforms, what do you think are the main differences? I ask because one could imagine a similar but non-corporate system using open designs with voluntary technology accelerated cooperation with police, as in old crime shows. Can I see that footage? I don't know if this
okay.
was
and I wonder if thank you for the question. I'm wondering if you're referring to video upload platforms like YouTube, or if you are referring to video cameras like Nest. And maybe I can try to answer it either way. So what do I see as the main difference? Well, with Ring in particular, regardless on which video platforms you're referencing, I see the main issue for me is the partnerships with law enforcement. And none of the other video surveillance programs actually have partnerships with law enforcement. So Ring has become, a central focus of my work for that reason. Yeah, and in terms of other corporate platforms and police surveillance, it's certainly possible. I mean, I'm sure it's already happening. I don't mean to be a conspiracy theorist, but any public content that's out there can be analyzed. So anything that's being published on a public platform, on YouTube or any kind of video platform, can be analyzed, and it can be analyzed in real-time crime centers. The concern here is when you pair that with residential surveillance, a residential surveillance network that is being tapped into real-time crime centers, both live feeds and recorded content. That is just a deep concern. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, so I don't know if I'm allowed to make this question, but maybe Anavisa will be a little bit not very happy with me, but I have a scholar comment to make as an academic, because your method is amazing. The ethnography that you're using, the ethnographic methodology that you're using is just amazing, considering that you're using the comments, the web pages, and all this material that is so ephemeral, right? So how can you talk a little bit, how did you shape your methodology in terms of this case study in particular?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Sophia. It took me a lot of discussion with a lot of friends and a lot of grappling with all of these different materials to understand that I can't actually approach it in its totality. It would be almost foolish to think that I could. And I'm also facing that issue with my dissertation research on Amazon and their infrastructures. So I found the walkthrough method to be a useful way to think about points of contact. So imagining that I am a user wanting to buy a Ring product, I started to think about, so what would that whole process look like? And what would that process even look like up until the point that I gave my footage over to law enforcement. So that's when I started to look at how other scholars had studied complex technological assemblages. And yeah, I found the walkthrough method to be useful, although they were looking at applications themselves. And it seemed to be somewhat an easier approach because they start with the application itself, and then they go through all of the different screens, but they start to think about, they started to draw from the cultural representations, semiotics, and doing an analysis as they walked through the application itself. But for an assemblage, it's not so easy to do. And I'm not, you know, I wouldn't say that I have completely analyzed the whole ring assemblage, but have just attempted to track a path through it. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, yes. We have a few more questions. So Madalena is asking on the voluntary choice to be part of this surveillance. So do you have any inputs on this?
Right. So in the case of Jackson, Mississippi, where they have the live camera feeds coming from Ring users into a real-time crime center, I have a real interest in going and talking to that community to really understand why they would sign up to this program. I do know that it comes at a really tricky time. It comes at a time when crime has been increasing all across the United States, and that is also the case in Jackson, Mississippi. And the local government have been, and the local police force have been kind of throwing their hands up, trying to figure out what to do. At the same time, there's been pressure to defund the police based on the Black Lives Matter movements. So technology provides this very convenient solution. You know, it's low cost. Actually, the community members themselves have to bear the cost of the policing. If they don't install a camera, they're not a part of the program. So it's a way to off-shoulder the cost onto the community themselves. And I know a lot of people are very interested to be a part of that program because they're very concerned about crime in their communities. And I can't blame people for wanting to secure their homes or wanting to have more security and to avoid violence or crime. It's just the matter of what law enforcement do and how they might be disproportionately targeting, especially communities of color. So I can't speak to why folks would want to be involved, but I do know that it is not all negative. A lot of people really are very positive, and they want to be a part of these programs with law enforcement.
Okay, I think we have an expert here. So Eduardo, I will go back to you, Paulo. I will go back to your question, but let's see what Eduardo has to say about Law 95-2021, approved in the Portuguese Parliament a few weeks ago. Article 14, access to other video surveillance systems. So for the purpose stated in Article 3, the security forces and services can access video surveillance systems of any public or private entity installed in public or private locations with public access. So, and 2, the security forces and services may view in real time the images captured by the systems referred to in the previous paragraph, either person or remotely. So you can check in more detail the law here. So
thank you, Eduardo. I believe we have been in email contact as I was asking for your counsel on this particular law. It does sound like it will have pretty serious implications for the Portuguese context. And just like the United States, if law enforcement are given access to these private recordings, they will be easily searchable, and it will be easy to add deep learning predictive analytics to this kind of content. So I'll be interested to see how it develops there.
So Paulo Nuno Vicente asks if there are any reports or known cases related with predictive policing and the use of these videos.
Thank you for your question, Paulo. I don't know, and Ring do not disclose, and nor do law enforcement disclose how these videos are being used. That is certainly part of the concern and the issue. I can only imagine that, especially in the Jackson, Mississippi case where they're using live feeds, that they would have to be adding some kind of analytics to make sense of all of that data as it's coming in. To have, you know, hundreds of, or thousands of cameras around a city, one, you know, like no human could cover all of that. So yeah, unfortunately we just don't know, which is, you know, it's part of the real deep concern around transparency and oversight.
Lauren, how are you? Let me just touch bases. It's like already like super tired. You need.
I'm great. I'm doing great. I'm doing great.
Okay. So I think you answered to Teresa's question about if you were aware of any of uses of these images in law processes. So in Portugal, all images are considered private. You would have to previously approved by a judge to access them. How is this in the US?
So in the US context, these images are private, but because of the way that the Neighbors platform is set up, it allows law enforcement to kind of act like a user, where they're putting like public requests, they're putting up like a post on the platform and just saying, hey, you know, we have this suspected crime in this area. Would you give us some of your content from your camera from this time to this time? And in the case where they would have to get a warrant, they could actually go to Ring to get that content, but they would have to get that approved by a judge as well. So in this, it blurs the line. It actually blurs a legal line, which is really important. And it could be amounted to what is called a warrantless search here. But at the moment, they're considered private, and this is all considered legal for the way that they make the requests. They don't force users to hand it over. The user ends up having the right to consent to release the content, but also, as I mentioned, they're consenting on behalf of anyone that's captured in those recordings.
There's the questions keep on popping in the chat. You need to tell me when you feel that, you know, like you're.
No, this is great.
Okay, good. So Ana Visa is asking if you feel like, if you know, or what do you think about if these cameras are actually useful for preventing crime? Because CCTV in the UK is not that useful for crime prevention.
Yeah, I do think that footage from these cameras is being used to prosecute. It just raises a lot of questions about how valid that it is as and the standard of proof in a court of law. But I know that Ring recordings have been used to prosecute. Yeah, and I mean, it just raises a number of issues really around consent is one of the main concerns here.
And I also was asking if you know when Ring started in 2013, was the idea of being did they have the idea of being associated with this law enforcement, or is something that just started with the Amazon acquiring them?
Yeah. So thank you for the question. Amazon started the partnerships with law enforcement after it acquired Ring, not long after it acquired Ring. So the Neighbors platform already existed. Actually, in the House committee meetings inquiry on antitrust in the United States, so that's our competition policy, it was revealed in an email exchange between Jeff Bezos and some other people in Amazon that they were purchasing Ring because of their market position, not because of the technology, which he states clearly in his email. So for me, that means like they could have recreated this technology. They could have made it themselves, but they decided to purchase Ring, not just because of the fact that they were already a market leader, but because they also had established this social media platform, Neighbors. So I don't know if they always had an intent to pair it with law enforcement, but you could see that maybe it was part of their strategy going in. And the question around their partnership with law enforcement is really an interesting one as to what Amazon get out of it. So they often give away Ring cameras to law enforcement. Seemingly, then they're not taking money from law enforcement for this Ring program, and instead it's something that's that users sign up to themselves and pay for. But I could see law enforcement buying other Amazon products, like their access to their cloud computing services or analytics, to make sense of all this data. So I could quickly see how there could be a market incentive from Amazon for their partnerships with law enforcement.
Okay, so we have another question by João Machado. He is saying, is Amazon itself allowed to use the footage and or bell ring patterns in any way to train models? For instance, are smart devices to be considered surveillance devices simply because of the way data has to be processed somewhere else, becoming useful in different ways?
Yes, I would agree with that all smart devices could be considered surveillance devices. No, Amazon, there's no restriction for Amazon to use the footage to train machine learning, artificial intelligence, to train models based on what data they collect from Ring cameras. And I do see this as part of a larger strategy of building out Amazon's surveillance infrastructures, where they have multiple different points to analyze customer behavior, from not just the video surveillance tools, but every interaction with the company itself. Now they currently have increased their marketing division, and they make a lot of money out of selling advertising space, which, if you look at Amazon's financial records over time, has started to become one of their biggest money makers, is selling advertising. So yeah, I see it as a crucial building block, as a part of their full surveillance infrastructure.
So you kind of open a Pandora box.
Yes. Yes, it's all connected in the assemblage, unfortunately. And for me, it brings me always back to the infrastructures themselves, like the physical computing infrastructure and what it makes possible, what it connects to, what it affords, and the impacts of our changing computing models from what used to be distributed forms of computing to these highly concentrated forms of computing that also have devastating environmental and social impacts.
Well, I think we need to like assimilate all these.
Let me just say one thing. I'm not sure, Warren, if you are aware of this, but one of the 3 large telecom companies was hacked on Monday. And actually the whole network was brought down, and it's been down for 24 hours, which then brought a cascading of effects from law enforcement to ambulances, hospitals not being able to connect. Even ATMs were out of work. And actually here at home, we still don't have phone. And so, I mean, hacking, you mentioned it briefly, but this was, I mean, it's been more than 24 hours now, and they've been kind of struggling to reconnect to the network. It's Vodafone, the big phone provider. So it's been really interesting to see, I mean, because obviously, as you said, there's an infrastructure behind this, and this infrastructure is incredibly susceptible to being hacked and to all sorts of malfeasance. And it's kind of interesting to see, we observe it around us, and I think you brought home very well the fact that we're bringing these technologies into our homes and thus opening up ourselves more and more to potential, risk and danger, which already in the last talk we saw about, children and technology. So,
yeah, wow, I had not heard about that. It reminds me of what happened in the United States last year sometime when the gas pipeline was hacked, and it led to all types of chaos, including increased gas prices, which haven't come down again. Yeah, more recently, there was a report about services that were down because an internet cable had been shot at. So part of the internet was disabled because of a physical shooting. Yeah, I think the thing that always amazes me in these moments of failure, which the ethnographer Starr will say that infrastructure reveals itself in moments of failure. The interesting part about these moments of failure for me is just how precarious the network is, just how precarious all of these connections are. And it really does reveal how non-distributed the infrastructure is. It will often pose, or the marketing messages will tell us that it's very versatile and flexible, and that the internet itself was designed to withstand a nuclear attack, but it's no longer the case. And for me, that's why the infrastructure itself is so interesting to study, because it raises so many of these concerns. And these are public concerns. They're not just private. It's not just like our relationship as a customer to a company. It's about public governance as well, and the collapsing of public services that are now being outsourced to private companies. So yeah, many, many concerns.
We have maybe the last question. Okay. So Asunção Duarte asks, from your research on customer support messages, app messages, and publicity ads, is it possible to identify a specific type of user profile for this system, like age, education, political background, association to specific citizen movements?
Oh, that's an excellent question, which I don't have an immediate answer to. I will say that a lot of the marketing messages seem to be focused or targeted towards suburbia. So it's a particular kind of construction of middle class, predominantly white communities, which then, raises other concerns around how those surveillance tools might be used against people that come into their communities that they consider out of place. Yeah, I don't have a specific answer for you, but it does seem like there is a strong appeal to a kind of constructed white middle class in the United States context. But thank you for your question.
Okay, Lauren, Anna, Christina, Paunono, don't know if you guys would like to add anything.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
So much. I mean, it's really, I feel secure to know that somebody is studying these and putting out these complexities. Thank you for bringing visibility to the infrastructure.
I hope it wasn't too depressing. Or
no, it wasn't. No, totally. I mean, no, especially because some of the imagery that you're showing, we're familiar with it. So, it's part of our everyday life. So it's good. It's good to see it in a different perspective.
Well, thank you so much as well for organizing the talk, and to everyone that tuned in as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.